Rugby is a sport that's characterised by high intensity efforts, tackling, striding, sprinting, breaking tackles, and that's interspersed with low intensity activities like walking, organising yourself before a scrum or a line out, making the calls if you're in the back line. But the high intensity efforts are the really meaningful parts of the game, and becoming a more explosive rugby player is going to be key in having success in the important and meaningful areas of the game. Explosive players can win the contact and present the ball back to their team to allow for quick ball. They can explode off the gain line in defence, track down their player and make yards in defence. Explosive players can ride a tackle and have an arm free to give an offload, or they can disrupt an attack in full flow with a perfectly timed and explosive tackle. Hey guys, how you doing? It's Fraser from rugbystrengthandconditioning.com. I'm the strength and conditioning coach for the Biella Bears out here in Italy, and on this channel we talk about the explosive profile. I appreciate the explosiveness is another one of those umbrella terms like conditioning, etc. But as ever on this channel, we're going to break that down so you really understand what I mean by that. I'm going to give you two real examples from our squad, and I'm going to give you the information on what we did and how to improve the explosive profile. So stick around to the end of this video because you'll have a weak template that you can use and implement based on where you are on a couple of factors that we're going to look at now. So before we look at these two examples, it's worth talking about the force velocity curve. Now, this is something we use in the industry to guide training. Generally speaking, the higher the force, the slower the movement. So if you think about moving a heavy back squat, that's going to be up towards the top left because it's going to be moving really slow, but it will have high force. Whereas if you think about doing a counter movement jump, that will come down towards the right because it will have a higher velocity. However, the force velocity curve kind of falls apart when you think about sprinting, where sprinters can have a vertical ground reaction force of 3 times their body weight on one leg. So my old professor Van Cleather suggests the load velocity curve makes a little bit more sense, so that's what we're going to use in this video going forward as a reference point, okay? So as you can see here, putting the force velocity curve to the side and using what Dan suggested in his book, which by the way I totally recommend reading if you're interested in strength and conditioning. But back to the load velocity curve, you can see here that we've got heavy back squats up to the top right. You can then see we work our way down to the curve, or up the curve if you're looking at velocity, to things like plyometrics, assisted jumps, and you can see that heavy cleans and trap bar jumps are somewhere in the middle of the curve. So guys, to keep things as simple as possible, and before we go into examples and explore other things, you can use the load velocity curve and just look at your week of training and look at where you're putting the most time into training. Are you always training towards that top left, or are you having a bit of a balance and training concurrently the top left with the bottom right? So really simply, you can look at the load velocity curve and decide, yeah, do you know what? Probably I'm going to be a more explosive rugby player if I start to incorporate things more down towards the velocity side of the load velocity curve, okay? Now let's have a look at the examples and the explosive profile that we spoke about earlier and take a deep dive into the details around how and why you can test, you can assess, and you can improve. And of course, we've got that example coming at the end of this video. So if I pull up this example here, let's first talk about the headlines of the explosive profile. And you'll notice that this covers every point in the load velocity curve. So we've got maximum strength in 1RM back squat. We've got loaded jumps in trap bar jumps or cleans, depending on what people use. We actually have on our records board 100 kilogram trap bar jump challenge. And we look at peak power and speed on that. Anyway, then we have a 10 meter acceleration. Now, as of this week, we're in Series 1 of the Biella Rugby 10 meter indoor championships, of which there's 3 per year. Okay, and it's just something to hype the boys around. We do blocks of 3, so we tend to do acceleration focus, change of direction focus, agility focus, and then repeat when it comes to our acceleration and agility work. Anyways, that aside, so we've got this 10 meter in our explosive profile. We then have squat jump, where a player lowers themselves down, they hold for 3 seconds, and then they jump as high as they can. That's obviously unloaded. Same thing with counter movement jump, we're looking at peak power there. Self-selected depth, hands on the hips, and I spoke about that in my Power for Rugby video, which I'm linking up here, and I gave you some normative data in that video as well that you can use to compare yourself to find out where you are athletically when it comes to your CMJ. And then we've got reactive strength, and there's 3 ways to assess reactive strength index. We look at a 50 centimeter drop jump and the ratio between jump height and ground contact time. So you're trying to get as high as you can while spending the least amount of time on the ground. So now you know what those headlines actually mean. This -3, -2, -1, 0, that's just a standardized Z score. So a Z score just allows us to have a ranking on a particular test relative to the mean and standard deviation of the squad, or in this case, the position. So it's something that S&C coaches use a lot to assess where players are within the group. So for example, if the mean on squat was 160 kilograms, that would have a Z score of 0. And in this example, if you were at a -2, then you'd have a 120 kilogram squat. If you're at a 2, then you'd have a 200 kilogram squat. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. And it's the same thing with 10 meter time, the same thing with everything else. Okay, we use a Z score just to give us that ranking, allow us to communicate to players, to coaches, and understand ourselves exactly where people are within a group and where we want them to be based on the standards that we're using and the standards that we've set. So in this example, we've got 2 back row players with very different explosive profile, and to make them better and more effective on the pitch, they're going to need a slightly different intervention to improve their overall explosiveness. So if you look at player 1, we can say that he's pretty statically strong, all right? Look at his squat, his trap bar jump, and his 10 meter time, okay, although that could certainly improve. He's statically pretty strong, even when he does the unloaded stuff, but from a static position in the squat jump, we can see that's further ahead than when he uses his stretch reflex, his elasticity in the CMJ and his reactive strength index. So that's why he focused on doing more ballistic type activities, all right? Instead of his main lift being a strength lift, I knew that we could maintain that max strength quality whilst using, say, power cleans or weighted jumps as his main lift for the day, and then spending more time focusing on exercises with quick impulse, quick ground contact times. So that's the player in green there, and I hope you see that and I hope that's clear. And that can be quite a hard message for a player to take when they are used to lifting. They like the sensation of being strong and getting under a barbell. I've just got myself to 200, I want to maintain that, but you've got to have that conversation with them. And if you're a player watching this, then it's amazing that you've made great strength adaptations if you're that green player, player 1. But remember the bigger picture, you're trying to be as explosive as you can on the rugby pitch. And if you have made good improvements and you're ahead of the curve, let's say, on the static stuff, then in simple terms, it's time to focus on the more dynamic stuff. Whereas player 2 is quite the opposite of player 1 in the sense of dynamically he's a lot better. He's not weak, he's at the average for his leg strength, but he could certainly improve in his static strength. So what we did there is train things concurrently but prioritize the strength. So we had a little less plyometric focus than the other player and a little more time spent in the strength range. He followed a classic structure of quick potentiation, main strength lift, secondary strength lift, and then he had 2 power exercises, and that was his session finished. Whereas player 1's first lift was a strength speed lift, followed by another strength speed lift and plyometrics. So you're not making massive changes, and it just goes back again to thinking about your week and your session globally and where you're spending your time on the load velocity curve in order to become a more explosive rugby player. And talking of becoming a more explosive rugby player, that leads us perfectly on to today's sponsor. So thank you very much to VITRUVE for sponsoring this video. We use their encoder here at BLA Rugby Club when we do our main lifts, when we do our secondary lifts, and the boys really perform better with real-time feedback. And if you're trying to be an explosive rugby player, then every single rep counts, and having that real-time feedback allows you to really push as much as you can into every rep. Whether you're doing jump squats or cleans or back squats or bench presses, you're going to want to know the velocity of the barbell to really push the quality of your reps and make sure you're getting the adaptations that you want. I love this linear positional transducer because you get the numbers on the box. So for some reason, if you don't want to connect to Bluetooth that day and get the numbers on your tablet, you can simply also have someone call them out just by looking at it on the box, which is amazing. But of course, every time we use it, we open up the app and either myself or other players will call out the numbers that the guys are doing, whether we're looking at peak velocity or mean velocity, or we're trying to mitigate against fatigue. There's so many ways that you can implement velocity-based training. Guys, I'd encourage you to go to VITRUVE's website, use code FMT5 at the checkout, and you will get a discount. Thanks again for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to the content. Okay guys, so let's dive into the detail of an example week as promised. Now, if you've ever bought a program from me, you will know that I put the dates up here, okay? And then I put the intensity up here, the sets and reps and the intensity, just to get an overview. So this might be, 5 sets of 10 at 70% hypertrophy, type protocol. Okay, obviously that's not what we're doing here, and we're just looking for an example week. So this is for the player, that sort of player one, that green player that's just come off a strength block, or certainly has a good prerequisite of strength and needs to focus more on that dynamic side to improve his explosive profile and ultimately his rugby performance. So you can see we've got Monday, Wednesday, Friday, okay, training rugby, Tuesday, Thursday, so we're sticking with that kind of UK club type week, all right, with playing on Saturday. And what you'll notice is we've got our 10 meter resisted sled sprints here, 5 sets, 1 rep of 10 meters, 90 to 120 seconds rest. And guys, I won't break down every part of the program because this video could go on for 30 minutes to an hour, and I'm trying to keep it as short and precise as possible. But what you'll notice on Monday is that we're focusing on the things that we need to focus on. So we've got clean pulls at 85% of his power clean 1 RM, so that's going to be nice and dynamic. Okay, we've got our depth jumps to box, dropping from a 50 centimeter height and then getting up to whatever box height is appropriate for that person, for that player. Then we've got our hang clean and jerk, assuming that this player is competent with the technique of hang clean and jerk. If not, then I would probably switch that out, if I can make the change now, to barbell squat jumps, and I'd put a pause in there, and I would change the percentages here to 40% and go from 40 to 45%. Okay, however, you know, we could change this multiple times based on, you know, the person that's in front of us. Okay, so that's Monday. You've got acceleration and power and a really good stimulus there, finishing with a little bit of upper body work as well. Now on Wednesday, we're looking to maintain the strength quality that we have, but we're keeping that we're keeping it nice and fast. We're keeping the set velocity above 0.5 meters per second. Okay, but you know, this player will still use 160 kilograms. So I'm operating off that 200 kilogram player, 200 kilogram squat, the player that we had last year, and that's pretty much what he was doing. So it was 160 kilograms, 4 sets of 3, and he was keeping his average set velocity above 0.5 pretty easily. Obviously, the feedback always helps to drive intent with that. Okay. Then we're going into hurdle jumps, just continuous jumps over the hurdles to get those quick ground contact times and help his explosive profile. Now, barbell step-ups is an interesting one. So you can use step-ups for lots of different reasons. You might want to use step-ups for a rehab type scenario. You can also use step-ups for a performance type scenario. So I'm looking at 3 heights of box to step up to: low, medium and high. When you're working with high step ups, you're in that rehab or muscle building. When you're in the middle to low, medium to low, then you're working on performance. Okay, and these are with assisted split CMJs, which we just use a band, we wrap it around where we do pull-ups, and that helps us. It's a bit of overspeed training. Okay. Nordic drops, I don't think I've actually put that on my YouTube yet, so I shall, but it's just Nordic curls, only you're using the drop catch method. I've definitely talked about the drop catch method in other videos, and it's something that's extremely useful. Yes, for breaking through barriers for hypertrophy, but in this case also for power development. Okay. Then again, we're using our encoder, our velocity-based training, just to inform what we're doing with the upper body work. Of course, the focus of this program is the explosive profile, and there we have to prioritize what we're doing with the lower body, but you'd be surprised at how you can make progress in the upper body if you have just high quality sets and reps there. Okay, and this program is very much like, you could add a couple of things after to the upper body that wouldn't take away from what you're doing and improving your explosive profile. And I always say that to the guys. I'm always asking, okay, session done, it's time for your extras. And maybe one day in another video I'll go into what extras we have. We have some positional extras, like a front row player might have to do more neck work. A back row player might do some more shoulder care work. So I've not included that here, but it's definitely something that we have within our program. Again, just running through an example. Okay, so here we have our single leg plate snatch a la Franz Bosch. Okay, and then we have pose to box jumps. I really like this primer at the moment. It seems to be working really well for guys and helping the explosive profile. As every Friday here at Baylor Rugby, we have our trap bar jump challenge for our forward pack. And we're looking for the velocity to be, the peak velocity to be greater than 1.8 meters per second. And that can range from 90 kilograms to a younger back row player, all the way up to 120 kilograms. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll see some of the stories and some of the outputs that the guys are doing. I usually screenshot and share what we're doing with VITRUVE there, so it can be quite interesting. Then we're going into 5-meter drives, and the whole purpose of this session is, yes, to affect and get the adaptation that we're looking for. We're trying to be explosive rugby players, but you're not going to take away from what you need to do on Saturday, and that's the main thing. It's almost like, if you want to call it a primer session, you could, because if you're looking at things, you know, they're relatively light. I mean, that's going to be light because you're having to hit these velocity zones, these numbers, okay? Same thing on the push press, and then you've got your landmine punch, and sure, your chin-ups there are for strength, and this is a little bit of shoulder care, as I talked about before. So guys, that is a detailed program, an example program, sorry, and all the details that go into the week. If you're someone that's trying to affect your explosive profile, and you're maybe more like that first player that shared, that green player, where you focused on strength a little bit, I need to work more on the dynamic type exercises. So this could be something that could really help. Let me know in the comment sections if you have any questions about this. And again, I'm just sharing a week just to give you a flavor of what this can actually look like. You know, it's going to be slightly different from person to person, but hopefully that gives you a really good idea of how you can actually structure your week if you want to build your explosiveness for rugby. And that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching my video. Really hope you've got something useful out of it and you have a greater appreciation of the explosive profile, and that was really clear. That was the whole purpose of this video. Guys, if you liked it, please do give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate that. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing, because that really helps my channel grow and get this message out to more people. As ever, if you have questions, fire them into the comment section and I'll get back to you. Thanks again to VITRUVE for sponsoring this video. And guys, that's it. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers. Ciao.